What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about what is the dynamic parkour trace system. A little bit about, what it is, how it works, the base setup of it, is in the tutorials and all that stuff, but I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the power behind the system. So, in this video, we're going to kind of cover, what the system is, how it works, and just the basics understanding. And I guess we'll start with what is it? I guess that's the biggest question. Well, essentially, it is a parkour tool. This is something that allows you to be able to create vaulting, mantling, tic-tac actions, drop, or ledge type actions. And there's a ton of different configurations that can be set up through, things like the settings menu and the climbing generator, all that type of stuff. There's a ton of different ways that you can set things up. Now, as far as like how it works, the system is comprised of three main pieces. The first one is a world trace element where it goes and looks for the area around the player. So if I go, for example, and I'm right here, if I'm, it's going to look and see if there's just to kind of put a player there and then take him out. But if there's, it's going to look for this ledge here, right? It's going to find this ledge, or it's going to find if I'm facing this way, right? It's going to find this sidewall, or if I'm facing this way, it's going to find this object. It's going to look for something, and I can show you here. There's actually a way to be able to define all that information inside of the settings menu. So this here is a character blueprint that I've set up with a lot of the baseline elements necessary. This is also my testing project as well. So you might see some things in here that aren't in the other one in future videos. This one should be, I think, the most up-to-date version of the system as well. But anyways, so if we go ahead and we take a look at the settings here, so we go to the primary system settings, and I'll just turn on the trace options for the initial trace here. And if I hit play, now you're going to see that when I hit spacebar, because right now it's just set up to use the jump input, it does a trace forward. There's some traces that go downwards, and then there's a trace that goes kind of left and right. This is looking for ledges or drop-offs, objects in front of the character, and sidewalls. So for example, if I go over here, you'll see that it finds a sidewall, but it finds no ledge or object in front of the character. If I go here, you can see that it finds an object in front of the character, and then traces the object's depth and height to be able to figure out exactly what type of object type it is. Now, there's an entire classification of different object types and the way that they operate inside of the settings menu, which we'll kind of cover here in just a moment. But essentially, this is the first part of the system. First, it goes and looks for what the situation is around the player, and then assesses if it does find something like an object or something, gets all the information about it that it needs to be able to select an appropriate action type. However, it is not as simple as just tracing and that's it. There's an entire series of mathematical calculations that are also going into the system as well. So, for example, excuse me, if we take a look at the system settings here, and we open up the, let's see, we'll go to the ground action settings, we'll open up the vault settings here. So you see the max distance for long distance vault. And that particular action is basically this. So if I go up to an object that's, let's say medium height, and I allow this action and set up the conditions for it, which we'll cover here just in a minute. But you can see that it rolls over and is able to kind of go over it. But the calculation, one of the things that's kind of stopping if it can do it is this number here. And there's a lot of different actions that have this. For example, tic-tac also has its own height min-max, so you can set different values for tic-tac actions if you'd like. You also have the miscellaneous actions, which have wall run settings, dive and slide height and width parameters, because it's going to actually trace the available opening and kind of give you that information as well. For climbing, we can control the fly speed and the braking deceleration. So these are things that allow you to be able to control like how fast you're, going to move on a ledge, how fast you're going to slow down when you stop an input. So these are all things that you can control from the menu here. But a lot of this is being controlled through a various number of settings. Now, the next part of the system is going to be an action selector based off of all the different calculations and, if you've allowed the actions, because you can also, for example, here under allowed actions vault, I can turn this off. And if I go up to this option here, you can see that, oh wait, that's too high. Bring that down so it's more medium height level. You can see that now he just does the jump, because even though, yep, it's found it, it's, we have all of the information we need to perform the action, but we're not allowing the action. So we're just going to jump instead. And it's again because we're using the use jump input option with this particular setup. But if I go ahead and just select that, and then I hit play, and then now you can see he'll do the short vault over. So you can allow any actions you want. All the actions that are available within the system are also able to be blocked or allowed based off of whatever you are needing for your particular game. And this doesn't just restrict to ground settings. There's also climb settings here, where if we go into the climb type settings and, for example, ledge, on ledge allowed actions, we can do climb up, vault over, mantles, drops, vault over type of actions. We also have point-to-point climb directions where you can set it to 4 directions or all 8 directions, just up or down. You can really kind of define what you want to have in your system. It'll still look for all the information, but it won't actually output or perform anything based off of what you set to yes or no. So there's a lot of different ways to configure the system, essentially what my point is here. Now, the final part of the system, just because we're getting into the climb settings here, is that after it chooses an action, so these are actually, just to kind of show you here as well, these are the action selectors. So everything is kind of sent through using an interface that you can add to your character blueprint. You can see here under action events, we have vaults, miscellaneous, mantle, gap, all that stuff, and it's just putting out an enumeration. And because it's using a simple enum, we can then just go ahead and plug it into a switch or a select, however you want to do it. If you wanted to do like a switch on, you could do something like this and play a bunch of montages off of this, or you can just pull off and get a select node like this, plug it into the montage play, and then there you go. So it's entirely up to you. You can do a bunch of different ways, but essentially the enumeration allows you an easy way to control switching between different animation or montage actions based off of what the system believes is the most logical action based off of what it's found. So there is an intelligent trace system, an intelligent calculation system, as well as a fairly robust double check of all the information to ensure that it's going to provide the right type of action based off of a variety of things. Now, and I've done a bunch of research from online videos about real life parkour, playing a bunch of parkour games also, and really just analyzing how things move, how things work. And I've tried to really take a lot of those principles and apply them into the system here. So, and as far as setting things up go, as long as you have whatever parameters you want in your menu defined, so your allowed actions, your the settings, traces, all that good stuff. As long as you have all that defined, what you can then do is then just set up your objects. Like if I take this and if I hit play here, it'll do the rollover, or if I'm not sprinting, it'll do the mantle. So this is how the sprinting modifier works, and we'll cover a little bit more on that here in a minute. But if I go and just take this and move it inwards, it's now going to do a vault over instead. It's not going to allow us to mantle onto it. It's not going to allow us to do the long vault over it because it's too short or narrow of an object. So you can literally just use the objects themselves. You can scale them or just use their preset size, and the action selector will actually go ahead and choose the most appropriate action to get over that type of obstacle. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it is collision based. So if your objects don't have collision, it will not find anything. But you are going to want to make sure to have collision, and as long as you do, this is really all you need to do is just go ahead and define a few things. So like in the character blueprint here, if I open this up, if I go to the event graph here, so the first thing is we want to make sure to set initial references, and this is just getting a reference to the character using the actual asset itself. And then from there, we're going to do a quick override of the input direction. This is just to ensure that when you're on a ledge, it doesn't use the actor's control rotation to influence the direction when actually trying to move left or right on a ledge shimmy. And that's really all this is doing is, as you can see here, we got the actor rotation, control rotation, and it's just doing a couple of overrides based off of if we're, climbing or free climbing or, whatever the case is. So now from there, we just got to add a quick get movement input, and this is just because there's certain calculation offsets that are being done based off of left, right, forward, back, and this is just to help, make sure that certain things are being offset to the left or to the right or up or down. With when you're kind of on ledges and it's doing traces. And then from there, it's just kind of getting this execute trace function. This event right here is kind of the call to the primary system. And then from there, it's kind of just what extra pieces you want to use. Like for this here is the sliding. So if you don't want to use sliding, you don't even have to use this. But if you do, you can go ahead and just, if you want to use free slide, it'll just use the free slide. It'll literally just go and do the slide montage. So if I press C, oh, I have the wall run left. That's the reason I was like, why did it just do that? Get my sliding animation. Now, the one thing is that if you're using the free slide, currently the slide does have a motion warp window in it. So I'm going to just duplicate it really quickly. And I'm going to take the motion warping out, keep the reset parkour action in there because this is going to ensure that, everything gets called back to as necessary. But you don't have to put it in there, but it's just kind of, just in case. But so if I put that in there, I'm going to get the slide 1 animation in this time. Compile and save. Now if I hit play, I can go ahead and I can just press C and it'll just do the slide. I can do this any way I want. There's nothing restricting me, nothing preventing me. Now if I take off use free slide and then press play, you can see that it's going to use the system instead. Now there is something that I'm working on right now to try and fix this, because right now if you press C, it'll do a jump if you're using the use jump input. Now there's a couple of obvious easy overrides that could be done, but I'm trying to find a better solution to it. But it's not entirely game breaking, because essentially if you're using the use jump input, a lot of times when you're doing things like this, you want to be able to do actions like this where you're dropping down, but if I press the space bar, it's going to do more of a drop to falling rather than dropping down to the ledge. So there is an advantage to using it. There's just one unfortunate issue that I am still working out to try and get a best working solution for. But other than that, everything else with the slide works perfectly because it does trace the dimensions of an object for the allowed action. So if I go over here, this is my sliding and diving area. If I press C, it'll slide under. However, if I press the space bar, it'll go up and over because it's doing an up and over or under based off of the input action. So if I go C here, and then I can dive through the window, and you can see that the traces are happening where it's going up, down, left, right, and getting the middle point of that object. And this is allowing us a nice, perfect spot to get our slide or our dive if we are using the system. Now, there's also a Boolean value for tracing behind if you're on a climb value. This way you can control when the climb trace behind is going to happen. So like, for example, I have, let's see, where is it? This part here. I have this part set up here. This is probably something you might have seen from the trailer video. But yeah, so we can go behind, and then if I press the left Alt key and then just press a climb direction button, you can see it jumps back to the ledge, which means I can do this, and then I can drop down, making some really cool, unique kind of combos you can do with your actions. But it's all based off of just this Boolean value here. Same thing with the sprint modifier here. Like everything is pretty much about as simply controlled as I could possibly make it. So you just need to just set conditions to set these Boolean values to true under whatever conditions you want them to be. And the system will do the rest. As long as they're true, they'll do this. As long as they're false, they'll do this. So as long as the values are being set accordingly, which these are all pretty simple to add in, as you can see, this one's just using the action value. They're all pretty baseline. And another thing that I just want to talk about, since we're right here, is an event that's been added in as well that's called Event Action Ended Execution. So this is under the primary events where you can also find the set warp locations function. This here is essentially to allow you, because when the system goes and attaches to a ledge or does a climbing function, it's going to disable all rotation, fly speed is going to be set to a certain value, braking deceleration is going to be set to a value, and gravity is going to be set to a value. Now, because your version of gravity or your version of flying or your rotation settings are going to be probably completely different from somebody else's, what I did is I just disabled all rotation and I set these values to what needs to be set. However, in order to reset them back, this execution here allows you to be able to set them back to the values you specifically want. If you're not using orient rotation and movement and you use controller desired rotation instead, just swap this out. This part right here, you can just swap this out and good to go. It's pretty easy to be able to get everything defined. And as far as the motion warping itself, that's really this right here. So we're just getting the event that's sending the warp locations from the system to the player. And then in this function here, we've got the add or update warp target with, just warp 1, 2, 3, and 4 set into the names. So it's a very easy, simple system. But there's a lot of other uses to it too. Now, before we get into the other, like the climbing and all that kind of stuff, I do want to, I have this set up here so that way I can show you guys kind of some other uses for the system as well. So, and this is just for like the trace side of the system. Now, I know I still haven't gotten to the third part of the system, but the third part of the system is the climbing more so side of things. And that's why we're gonna talk about that here in a moment. So don't think I've only gotten, I've said there's three and I've only gotten to two. Don't worry, we're gonna get to that third piece. But so with the warp locations here, if I go, so you can see I've got the show debug spheres options here selected. So if I go, just get to a spot here, and if I do this, you can see that there's the yellow, blue, green, and red options. Let me disable these traces here just to make it a little easier to see what's what. So I got none there and none, none there. Okay. So if I go and do this now, you should see, okay, perfect. So I'm going to slow this down so you can see that the red location is getting to the front position, and then we got the height and depth, which is the yellow and the blue, and then you have the green, which is generally always going to be the landing position. For actions that have a landing position, just to clarify. So like for the mantle here, you can see that the green is right there. There's a lot of different, uses for these types of locations. Like for this here, you can see that the yellow here is actually brought down though. So it's no longer really giving you that exact height point. Like if you needed to know exactly where this ledge here, this ledge right here, if you needed to know exactly where that was, you didn't need to use it for like a root motion offset. Let's say you wanted to use it for, I don't know, grappling hook. All you would need to do is go into the miscellaneous overrides here, set use default locations to true, compile and save, and then now we can get the default locations instead. So if I go ahead and just kind of move my actor, slow things down so the debug spheres stay a little longer, you can see that we have the nice height point, depth point, and a land point. Now, another cool thing that we can do with this, and this is what this is actually we can get dimensions of objects using the system as well. So if I go ahead and hit play, all right, sorry about that, guys. My print strings weren't working, and I'm sure you guys have had this issue before where you have to restart the editor in order to get them working again. So I just cut to the part of where I got it back up and running. So if we'll play it now, and you can see that it says 194 up in the top here. I'll do this again so you can see 194.9999999. So that's what it's saying this distance is. Now, if I were to, now remember, if we trace it from here to here or here to here versus here to here, like that straight line, that distance is going to be a little different, So in order to ensure that, like, let's say, for example, you want to use this almost like a measuring tool, basically, right? Well, you would just need to make sure that the start rotation is going to be the same from where you want it to be. Now, if I hit start here and then I hit the space bar, 291.52. Here, I'm going to make that print string last a little longer on the screen here so that way we can confirm information. We'll set this to a 5-second. So we got 291.525803. So if I hit that again, 291.525803, do it again. So, and because I haven't changed this object, if I go ahead and I make this a little smaller, 230, make this a little smaller again, 175. So you can see that it's giving back the exact difference because what we're doing is we're breaking the transform between the warp 1 and warp 2, which is the height and depth, and getting that distance 2D, so just the distance without the height, and then just seeing what that value is. And you can do a lot of things with just this alone. This is the reason why I wanted to give the locations back in sort of an event function like this, because it allows you to be able to look at what the information is and maybe make some adjustments inside of your own player character. So that's one of the biggest things about this is that there's a lot of modularity between the settings menus, between how you can set these Boolean values, and what you can do with these actual target locations. And that's not to mention, if we go to the action events graph here, these are all of the primary events that are inside. If we open the interface for the action events here, you can see vault, miscellaneous, tic tac, on ledge. All of these are these. They're just being called right into the system, and they're going off and getting the montage with the switch or select node, and very easily just defining the information. Now, as far as what what montage you put in here, you can do whatever you want. There's no restriction per se. You just want to make sure that you define the warp locations accordingly, and you're good to go. There's nothing that says that, oh, I can only do this. Like, for example, just to kind of show you guys, if I go and let me get this player start out of here. If I go up to this wall here, okay, if I go and press the space bar, it's going to, I got to turn off the use default locations. Components, dynamic parkour trace system, use default locations, and then I hit play. Whoa. There we go. So now if I hit play, you can see that he does the tic-tac wall jump, with that nice offset to be able to make it so it looks like he's actually jumping off the wall. Now, what would happen if I, for example, instead of doing the tic-tac left free jump, did, let's see, what's something that's already got warp for? It would be monkey, ledge. There we go, the monkey drop. If I remember correctly, this one has, yep. So if I go ahead and hit play now, you can see that he did the monkey vault instead. It didn't do anything game breaking. It's just kind of did like a weird, vaulting over this is it, and then that, done. And then reset itself. Does this make sense? No. But what it shows is you can use whatever animations you want. It's providing you with locations based off of action types. So for example, if I took, let's say this cube here, we'll duplicate it. We'll bring it up a little bit and forward. Maybe scale it a little bit bigger. Then if I hit play, it might not be up high enough. My tic-tac actions require a little bit of height in order for them to make sense. But yeah, you can see that now he's getting the warp 1, 2, 3, and as well as 4, because we now have found an object. So we have an object to get the depth from, but we do not have an object to get the depth from if we're just doing, like, we've just found the sidewall, right? We're just doing a tic-tac jump. Well, in this case, I've got it set back to the mantle. But yeah, so if we're just doing this, right, we haven't found an object. We found a sidewall, which means we can do a sidewall type of just tic-tac jump, but we can't do an object-based obstacle or jump onto because there's nothing there. So this is the type of things that are going to allow you to really have full control over the system. Let me just get this put back on here. So this is the tic-tac left free jump. Be this one here. Compile and save. There we go. So, you can kind of put whatever you want, but now that I fixed that here, we should get the nice tic-tac action put back in there. So once you, have your motion warp windows set up here and have your notifies called in here, and that's really another thing too, is that all the notifies are built into the system. So if you right click, add notify to reset action and put yourself into like a more of a ground state or falling state, you would just call this notify of, reset parkour action right here. So you would just call this in, and it will reset, any plane constraints, rotation controls, anything like that, and it will also execute that action ended execution event. But however, if you're trying to set climbing, there's also a built-in notify here for setting climbing. Now that notify calls to the system, it does a few different things. So it gets all the information about the climb point you're on, the information it needs about where it needs to go, and all that good stuff. But again, that's for climbing. So now just to recap really quickly. So again, we have the first two parts of the system, which are the world trace elements, where it goes out and kind of traces the object's height, depth, or the area around it for ledges and sidewalls. And then based off of that information, if it finds an object, traces all that, gets all that information, and outputs to an action type. Now, this is from a ground position. So, for example, if I went over to this item here, which is a little higher up, he's going to climb up and reach onto the ledge. But this puts me into what is technically now a climbing state. This is an on-ledge state, so which is why I get these as my positions. I get a nice, starting and ending location for the actual corner transitions. Now, when you're doing these types of setups, there's two different ways that we can kind of set up climbing. But in order to get to climbing, we have to have some sort of, transitional animation. And that's where kind of the ground actions are going to allow this to happen. But when you're doing like that climb up to ledge, when you're at the edge, end of that animation, Let me just go and actually, I'm going to find it through my miscellaneous actions here. So you can see that on the end of this here, we're going and setting climbing. So it's going to go through and it's going to either look for a climbing point, which is used by the climbing point generator spawner that comes with the system, which these are created from here. We are going to cover that here in a moment, but yeah, so it's going to look for either a ledge or a climb point, and it's going to set information based off of what it finds. But you don't really have to do anything else. You just have to set the notify, and the system kind of does everything for you. But again, the first two parts is the trace location, getting all that actor information, all that world information, and then going back and outputting to some sort of action type. Now, the third part of the system, which is the final part, which is the more kind of, I guess you could say, controlled part of the system, is the ledge positioning information. So these are things like plane constraints, rotation disabling values. There's also a couple of things that like help adjust with locations and adjustments with rotation values at runtime. So there's a lot of different things that this is going to happen, but like when you're on a ledge, for example, something like this. Oh, that's not up high enough, so I'll have to use this one. Go ahead and just expand that a little bit there. But when you're on a ledge like this, right, you want to make sure that the character stays actually on the ledge and doesn't kind of go like away from it, like this way, or floats up above it. So this is where we set things like plane constraints and disable rotation values, and all of that does have to be applied, but it's all implied internally for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But they're baseline elements, and that's really all that's in there, is kind of like the necessary pieces. So this way, it's not controlling things unnecessarily. And anything that it does control, again, there's that nice event to be able to set it all back to what you need it to when everything is all said and done. But that's the third part of the system. So you have the tracing the object, deciding an action, and then in situations that it need be, setting certain control values. And all of these together give you the ability to set up an easy parkour system. So now let's talk about the climbing a little bit. We're going to go and kind of move forward. So the climbing is actually very easy to set up, and is set up pretty much the exact same way. You're going to use warp locations combined with the setting of the climbing notify if you're moving from a point to a point. But if you're doing something like a vault over or a climb up or a drop down action, you're going to, use the reset parkour action notify. So from there, you just have to basically set your map up however you wish. So again, with objects of this height, just predefined by the settings menu, it'll go ahead and attach the ledge. But if it's this height, or I believe up to right about maybe there, and anything beyond this, yeah, actually that's too high. So if I bring it back down a little bit, so it's within a certain max height range of 650 units, I believe is what I set it to. Yeah. So like that allows me to be able to climb up there, but anything beyond that, I cannot. So let's say, for example, you have a wall like this that you want to let your actor climb up. Then you're going to need to be able to use something to be able to climb up to it, and hence why the climb point generator has been added. So if I open up the DPTS assets folder here and go to blueprints, you're going to see the climb point generator here. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this out, and I'm going to put a new one in so that way I can show you guys really quick. So when you add it in, you can see it's fully blank. There's nothing going on, but we can easily change that. If we, with it highlighted, go to the default under the primary settings, you're going to see point spawn settings, which we can expand here like this. And I'm actually going to turn off my camera for this portion just because I know that that's kind of covering this area. So I'm going to get my ugly mug off the screen for just a few minutes. I promise I will be back. But anyways, so we're going to go to the point spawn settings here, and we're going to set the points per row. We'll set this to 4. Space between points to 250. Number of rows we'll set to 2, and the space between rows again to 250. So this is setting how many points, how many rows, and the space between the rows and points. Now we need to set up the box extent because these are all done through box space collisions. So we're just going to start with a basic 50, 50 by 50. Now as you can see here, it's rotated in a bit of a wrong direction, so that's fine. We can go ahead and just take it, rotate it -90, and there we go. Now, what we want is the y-axis pointing behind, and the reason for this is because, and this is mostly if you're using a couple different elements of the system. If you're not using these, it doesn't matter as much, but it's still recommended. But anyways, if we go ahead and we'll kind of change the size of these a little bit. We'll set the X in a little bit. We'll bring the Y in and definitely clamp the Z a bit. Something more like this. So that way they kind of resemble more of the points that are off to the side there. Kind of like, I guess you would say, more like bricks extruding out of a castle wall type of a thing. But speaking of castle walls, a lot of times these are, they've got rough edges and shapes and stuff. So if you wanted to be able to ensure that these points are snapped to their according location, you can select the option that says use trace to snap point to surface and select that to true. Now, the snapped location offset is going to be something we're going to use in a minute. But first, we should set a trace distance. So we'll just go 150. And you can see that they snapped to the actual wall here. However, they're a little clipped into the wall. So we're going to do an offset of 20, as you can see. Brings it forward. Excuse me. Apologize. So when you're doing these types of setups, you can kind of move it in or back as much as you want. But as you can see here, if I move just the blueprint, it's not going to do anything because it's snapping these points to the surface unless I go beyond 150 units. But then I can snap them back real easily. So now that we have our points snapped in, the next thing we can do is we can actually spawn items on these points. And that's just done by this menu here, spawn item on point, set that to true. Now, just because I didn't really want to make it restricted, you can spawn static or skeletal meshes. So just to show you here, just because why not, we'll go ahead and just spawn Manny. And there we go, we got a bunch of Mannies. If you want to climb on top of a bunch of Mannies, go for it. Ain't nobody going to stop you. But, most of the time you would probably be using static mesh, but I just wanted to note that you can use static or skeletal. I'm going to go ahead to this static mesh here, add in a cube, and change this from skeletal to static. Now, as you can see, the second I change the option, it does revert back to whatever this setting is. So you can keep both of these in here and kind of go back and forth if you want. It's really up to you. But you can use either or. And then to be able to actually adjust it, so you can see that the box is not only, or the cube is sitting above it, but it's also really big by comparison to the point itself. So we can go ahead and we're going to drop it down. Sometimes be a little laggy at first. There we go. We'll drop it down to right about there. And then what we're going to do is kind of move it, scale it in and back and down until it's roughly within size. Doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to get it within a reasonable level. Even that might not be enough. We'll go a little bit farther out and then a little bit up. Perfect. So now that these are aligned within our boxes, we can set the climb style for this. So if we go down here in this drop down, we can see climb style is currently set to none. But we can set this to ledge or point or free climb, wall run, whatever we want. Now, these are set up for a point-to-point type system, so we'll select point. Now, with points that are like this, that are kind of small, in order to make it so that way you don't accidentally attach to just the corner here and he ends up kind of like a little offset from the actual ledge position, there's also additional helpers that we can use. Like you can see here, these have little arrows coming off of them. So we can actually enable that by just enabling. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. Add targets to points right here. You can see it adds the arrows to them right there. Now, if you have floating points and you want to use these for both sides, there's also the double-sided target points. So you can kind of go either or. There's a lot of different options there. But once we set point, add some targets, make our box sizes. From there, all we need to do is just go and climb up to it. Bam, as you can see, when we were kind of a little bit offset to the left, it corrected ourselves. A little bit to the right, corrects ourselves again. And this is just making it so that way it gets a little bit, better positioning when he's going from point to point to point. Now, as you can see here, we're getting the land, which is kind of like the top of the point, as well as the depth, which is actually the kind of like the root bone position with the offset. Now, if I move these in just to show you, I guess I'll have to I'm going to turn off the snap settings here. I'm just going to move them in a little bit like this. If I hit play now, you're going to see that now it's the front wall. So if your points are very close to your front wall, you're going to get that location. However, if they're farther back, like how these were originally, you're going to actually get the top of the object instead. This can be used to climb up the object if you wanted to. Right now, there is an override that it's going to be looking for a point. However, you can use this to be able to create certain follow-up actions. But as you can see here, I can go from these two additional points and kind of climb between them and then climb up to this one, which this one here is basically the same thing. It's just 1 point, 1 row, different box extent size, and then using ledge instead of point. Same thing over here. This is a free climb type of thing. This one here is just, one box, 1 row, box extent size made kind of large, and the climb style set to free climb. And from here, if I just go and I kind of do a jump and attach to it, I get the free climb movement instead. Don't mind how abrupt the adjustments are. I don't have anything smoothing out the values. It's just a direct left-right input right now. But yeah, so it's very easy to set it up. And even with wall running is also something that's in the climb point generator here, as you can see. This is also something, again, 1 row, 1 point, set the size, add in an object, whatever you want. And then we can go ahead and we can just wall run. Very, very easy. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. You can chain these actions. You can do a lot of different things with them. But it's all set up through a combination of just, setting the height of the objects, adding in some points for your climbing, and then just deciding how you want those points to be, how you want the settings to be. So let's turn my camera back on. Because ultimately with the system, you're going to be looking at a day worth of realistically setup. From there, it's just, you might need to do some adjustments with climb points and add them throughout your map, or add them to your blueprints, or create a spawner, or, there might be different things that you might have to do. Because, depending on your map size, you're going to want to put these in to be able to make it so that way it has the ability to do what it needs to do. However, if you have something that's already in there, what I recommend is the main thing that it's looking for is a valid thing that has an actor tag of climb point. Now, there are a few other elements in there, like the active climb style, which is an enumeration you can add into your own thing just so it has what it needs. But ultimately, if you take a look at the main elements, you'd probably be able to break it down and integrate it very easily. I tried to make everything very, very baseline as far as like what is controlling what, while also just still maintaining that nice, AAA quality type of feel. Excuse me. So now with the climbing and the main pieces talked about, the last thing that I just want to kind of go over a little bit is the way that some of these inputs are controlled. Because as I had said before, if I go back to the event graph here, we got sliding here where we can use free slide, and we can get, a jump input here, which basically the difference is the system by default is going to, if you're going up, down, left, right, whatever the input value is, it's going to jump or climb or do a corner transition in that direction. However, you can set up so that way it's going to look for an input action of some kind using this Boolean value. For right now, it's just using the jump input, but you can set it up of a different value, a different key, whatever you want. It's basically just going to look, it's not going to allow any action to be performed until this is true. And then once it's true, it's going to reset itself back to false whenever the action value has been set back. So if you hold this button, you'll be able to keep going. If you don't hold this button and you let it go, well, you're not going to be able to do anything. So these are kind of the elements that are going to be stopping and preventing actions from occurring when they shouldn't be. But realistically, this is only just if you want that style. If you want free flow climbing, it does work just fine. I actually prefer the free flow climbing myself, just because it does add a bit of an extra input. But, depending on what your game system is, you might want to put that extra input in there because you might be using, you might want to stop and make it so that way you can use the W key to, maybe peek above the ledge or, do something like that. There's really no restrictions. It's, again, just the baseline elements. So there's a lot of things that you can do with this. As I had said, you can use it for grappling hooks. You can use it for tracing elements. You can use it for the parkour system that it was intended for. It's up to you. There's 9 different action categories. Each action category has anywhere between 2 to 8 different actions. Let me open this up here, the events graph, action graph here. You can see each one of these, you can take none off of them. Each one of them has a none option. But some of these have several, like this is all the directions, 8-way directional. This is all the on ledge actions. This is all the tic tacs with lefts and rights. So everything that you would need to be able to get a baseline element for your system is all right here. Very easy to set up, very easy to control, very modular. So there's going to be additional tutorials coming out later on, looking at how to be able to set up some various other elements of the system, as well as maybe some different options for setting up like a free flow style of system, as well as some other things that can be done. So stick around, guys. We are definitely not done. There's going to be also other updates that might be coming in the future, looking at like IK systems, and other sorts of advanced additions that we can put onto it. But essentially, the system is meant to be like a parkour tool for everybody. If you want climbing, vaulting, mantling, whatever you're looking for, the system here is going to be able to provide it for you. And it can also be provided in a replicated fashion. Everything is replicated internally. You don't even have to do any RPCs or anything like that. But if you are doing single player, everything has subsystems. It's just looking to see if that component replicates option is true. If it is, it's going to go in and start doing the RPCs. But if it's not true, which you wouldn't want it to be true if you're running, any single player type game, then it's going to just run the single player based systems. So there's a lot of modularity, a lot of configuration. So I hope you guys are excited. I know I definitely am. I've been working on this for about a year now. So this has kind of been my baby. But like I said, there's going to be more videos coming out. So I hope to see you guys in those next ones. Stay tuned. And until then, stay animated, y'all.